Hello, everyone. My name is Ezra, otherwise known as E-Soup, and we are starting Volume 4 today. I still can't believe we're already here. Volume 4 of QJJ. I still feel like we just started, but no, we're at number 4. Um, I want to take a moment to look at the cover of this volume because it's, I mean, just in general, I like to do that. And it's just like so freaking beautiful. Um, we've got a Shenza Chuan cover. So I think at some point coming up, there's gonna be a Xiao specific cover. But right now, for whatever reason, this cover is featuring Shenza Chuan. Um, Good to see all of you. Hi Lanjade, hi Wolf. I'm glad he could make it, Wolf. And Nina and Cookielicious, hello. Um, Good to see y'all. So, today we're just reading chapters 113 to 115 because I looked and I think it's the first one. I think it's chapter 113 is like kind of long. So, that's all we're going to get through today, but that is like a full 50 pages. Um, oh, Cookielicious, it's your favorite Danmei cover along with the KOD Japanese covers. I think I've seen the Kaleidoscope of Death Japanese covers, maybe, but I might have to look that up later and refresh my memory. Hi, Henry. I'm not Henry, I'm not even gonna read that one out loud. But hello. Good job. Uh, um, so my girlfriend was encouraging me to inform everyone that you can leave a tip in the way of a super chat in the chat. I think there's like an icon that looks like a dollar sign. I'm not actually I don't actually seriously want to ask y'all to do that, but if you are feeling generous, she was like, listen, you have the option now. You have to tell people that it exists or they won't do it. And I was like, okay. So, um, what else do I have to tell you before we get started? I think that was it. There's trigger warnings in the description if you need them. If I haven't already said that. And um I I was looking back at what happened last time and I just took note of a couple things. One is that Lei Jingzhe escaped, but I believe they have people on his trail. So I'm curious to see what happens with him. And also the big thing is that I think it was Chao Tianya found Jigong. So they have Jigong now. So we're gonna see a meeting again with Jigong, and I'm excited for that. And then we were possibly worried about Qidong attacking. But I had some theory. I'm not sure if they're going to or not. Um, it depends on what Chi Juyin thinks and like how much that's really up to her, I guess. And momentously, Xiaoqia announced that Shenzi Chuan is like the head of his household. He was like, I'm not getting with anyone else. So just to be very clear, I am with Shenzi Chuan and that's it. And of course, we got the scene at the end and the art that I could not show on stream. So that's kind of where we're at right now. And I do wonder if they're going to be if they're going to be seeing Jigong again in this first chapter because it's called Reunion. So that does make me wonder, like, who are we reuniting with? It's probably him. So I am so excited. I am going to get started on that chapter 113, Reunion. It was daylight's last hour. A few rays of evening sun lingered on the courtyard walls, diffused by the leaves of the pagoda trees. Ding Tao sat cross-legged on the veranda, keeping watch. He rolled some fruit around his silver plate, counting the pieces over and over again. Shen Zichuan had just awoken. He had slept too long and too soundly, and felt almost more exhausted than when he'd lain down, his back sore and aching. He opened the door, blinking for a moment when he saw Ding Tao. Ding Tao squirmed awkwardly under Shen Zichuan's gaze. Hiding the fruit in his hand behind his back, he asked apprehensively, "Gongzi, dinner?" Shen Zichuan stood quietly for a spell, one hand on the doorframe for support, before croaking, "What time is it?" "It's just now evening." Ding Tao was surprisingly astute today. He quickly added, "Gongzi slept the entire day. Master left the city at the crack of dawn. Lord Zhou and Mr. Chung Feng went together to see him off." The corners of Shen Zichuan's eyes were still tinged red. He was fair-skinned to begin with, and catching the last rosy glow of the evening sun, he looked flushed, as if he'd had too much wine. As he lowered his lashes to slip on his shoes, Ding Tao gaped at his beauty. He has got everyone admiring him. Still no word from Jueshi? Shen Zichuan descended the steps, but he was in no hurry to leave. He stood under the pagoda tree and looked up at the sky, slowly recovering from the residual effects of last night's exertion. That's one thing you could call it. No, Ding Tao fell into step behind him. While Shen Zichuan was distracted, Ding Tao seized the opportunity to hastily stuff the uneaten half of his fruit into his mouth, gulping it down ravenously. Shen Zichuan saw no sign of Meng. Xiao Qie must have taken him along. He turned back, startling Ding Tao, who choked. After a moment, Shen Zichuan said, "No one will fight you for it. Take your time." Ding Tao was coughing so hard his eyes swam with tears. Waving a frantic hand, he tugged at the front of his clothes and said with difficulty, "Gongzi, are we going to see Lord Zhou?" He and Mr. Chung Feng already had dinner and are in the front hall discussing things now. Shen Zichuan nodded. "By all means." Wolf, we're even giving children gay panics. After taking his evening meal, Zhou Gui had convened in the study with Kong Ling and various other Cizhou officials. He rose at once upon hearing of Shen Zichuan's arrival and dismissed the others. "His lordship informed us the vice commander was indisposed. We hadn't intended to discuss any military matters until tomorrow. We weren't expected you'd be well enough to attend today," Kong Ling said, hoping to alleviate any awkwardness as he showed Shen Zichuan to the seat of honor at the head of the room, facing the door. He returned to his place, angling his body to face Shen Zichuan and Zhou Gui, and continued, "Although we're still in the hot 6th month, the trees in the residence are all tall with lush canopies. There's not much direct sunlight, and it's often brisk at night. Moving here after so many years in Chudu, the vice commander must be mindful of your health." Shen Zichuan took a sip of tea to moisten his throat. The hoarseness in his voice now a little less obvious. He said, "You're right, of course. You mentioned we would discuss military matters tomorrow. Does that mean you've agreed on a plan for the garrison?" "In the days since the vice commander signed a treaty of alliance with us, I've gathered my advisors alongside the various ranking officials of Cizhou and drafted a simple plan." Hand on his knee, Zhou Gui watched as Kong Ling rose and passed a thin booklet to Shen Zichuan. "This is all tentative," he continued. "We'll still need the vice commander's approval on the specifics. Take a look. If there's anything amiss, let's raise it for further discussion tonight." Although he had said they were waiting on Shen Zichuan's approval, Raise it for further discussion meant most of the plans within the booklet had been finalized. This was the predicament in which Shen Zichuan found himself. He had money, but no practical authority. Xiao Qiye's deferential attitude toward Shen Zichuan was the only reason he had a seat at the table with these two. Zhou Gui could thank him and might even hold him in high esteem, but he would never hand over his authority to make policy in Suzhou. They had agreed on a treaty of alliance, not allegiance. The room fell silent as Shen Zichuan read through the booklet. He had left Ding Tao outside, teasing his sparrow. There were no servants nearby to disturb them. As Kong Ling sipped his tea, he was struck by a sense of unease. He maintained his composure and studied Shen Zichuan's expression, but could read nothing on his face. He glanced at Zhou Gui, whose knit brows gradually betrayed his mounting anxiety. He couldn't help but consider. Shen Zichuan might be young, but he was incredibly shrewd, and adept at keeping his thoughts to himself. After spending several days together, Kong Ling still couldn't gauge how he felt about their arrangement, and therefore had no idea how to respond. Drafting this book had partly been an attempt to sound him out. By the time Shen Zichuan shut the book, the sun was gone. He rubbed his fingertips on the side of the teacup without saying a word. Kong Ling also kept silent. He was merely the advisor. It wouldn't do to overstep his authority and bypass Zhou Gui during discussions of serious official affairs. Zhou Gui asked Kong Ling to light the lamps, then turned to face Shen Zichuan head-on, deliberating over his next words. At last, he said, "What does the Vice Commander think?" "Your Excellency has precisely recorded the price fluctuations of the daily necessities of firewood, rice, oil, and salt in Suzhou over the past few years in this ledger. There will be no problem estimating next year's expenditure. I can see you've also calculated the military pay and provisions that will need to be allocated for the garrison troops. With so many aspects to take into consideration, Your Excellency must have worked tirelessly," Shen Zichuan said with a smile. Zhou Gui let out a light sigh of relief at those words. He didn't know why he'd been so tightly wound to begin with. This was not something I could prepare alone. I have Cheng Feng and my fellow officials to thank for this. Then, shall we discuss the defense of the city walls? Shen Zichuan's fingers stilled on the cup. Not quite yet. I have some questions. Please, go on, Zhou Gui prompted him. Your Excellency has estimated Suzhou's approximate expenditure for the next year. Other than the amount allocated for the new garrison troops, there is also a reparation of 16,000 dan of grain owed to the 20,000 heads of the Imperial Army, bringing the total sum for both armies to 110,000 dan. There's a footnote for dan. Dan, a volumetric measure for grain, approximately equal to 100 liters. 1 dan is made up of 10 do. This is a projection based on the yield from the bumper harvest in Suzhou last year, and the grain consumption of Suzhou's current populace. But I can see Your Excellency has left a remaining 10,000 dan of grains unallotted. That's right, Zhou Gui answered. Although Xiao Qiye said he didn't require payment, it was impossible not to offer something. 16,000 dan of grain would feed the 20,000 soldiers of the Imperial Army for 2.5 months at most. But it was more than the monthly amount they allocated to the 20,000 Suzhou garrison troops. Though Suzhou was unable to supply a year's worth of grain, they had truly done their utmost. Worried Shen Zichuan found it too little, Zhou Gui said earnestly, "I'm showing Suzhou's accounts to the Vice Commander today, in the hope that the Vice Commander and the Marquis will understand our predicament. Due to instability across the empire, our grain from last year has been successively allocated to Libe and to the bandits of Mount Luo, which we could never have foreseen. In past years, Juishi's granaries were solely responsible for the supply of military provisions, but this responsibility is now split between the two prefectures of Cizhou and Huaizhou. I can't speak for Huaizhou, but Cizhou had to scrimp and save in order to meet that quota. It's not that I'm complaining to the vice commander, but the truth is, we're gritting our teeth to feed his lordship's 20,000 soldiers, even temporarily. At this rate, there will be nothing left in the granaries in a couple months. Fortunately, we're nearing the autumn harvest. Counting the days, we should just about make it until then. That's the only reason we're not yet desperate. I would like to ask the vice commander to intercede with his lordship on behalf of Cizhou regarding the 16,000 dan of grain. It's not that we want to go back on our words by providing it to him next year instead of now, but there's really too much else to consider. Shen Zichuan did not immediately reply. The frown permanently etched between Zhou Gui's brows deepened. He got to his feet and paced a few steps across the floor before he continued. Cizhou is a place where the livelihood of its people is at the mercy of the elements. No one can say for sure if the heavens will be benevolent next year. Considering the current state of our empire, I fear that once war comes upon us, the fertile farmlands Cizhou has so recently cultivated will be trampled under soldiers' boots. Should that time come, even the common folk of the city won't be able to fill their stomachs. There will be nothing to feed a garrison, even if we establish one. We set aside the military grain not only for a rainy day, but also in preparation for the needs of the Libe armored cavalry. Vice Commander, it's not that we're unwilling to give a bigger share to the Marquis, but the Libe armored cavalry is the first line of defense against the Hanma tribe. It's undeniable that they are strategically more important than the 20,000 men of the Imperial Army. Half the reason Cizhou was willing to sign a treaty of alliance with my lords is that I was thoroughly heartbroken and disillusioned by the moldy grain sent to the front lines by the Wei clan and their collaborators in the military provisions case. The fact that his lordship the Marquis is the second young master of the Xiao clan has also dispelled many of my misgivings. This is a favor to my lords, but particularly to Heir Xiao. Although you've promised us the continued use of the Northeast Provisions Trail, I can't depend on this. Juishi is the granary of the Empire, after all. There is no doubt the various clans will fight to claim this supply route. The Vice Commander wants it, the Empress Dowager even more so. Everything I've said to the Vice Commander this evening is sincere. These words come from the bottom of my heart. Zhou Gui paused, slowly bowing to Shen Zichuan as he continued. It's not easy to make a living when the world is in turmoil. As the prefect of Cizhou, the prefecture's safety must be my first priority. His lordship and the vice commander have helped Cizhou out of a tight spot, and for that, I won't hesitate to go through fire and flood for you both. If Cizhou has another bumper harvest this year, we can add more to the 16,000 dan of grain for the Imperial Army's allocation next year. But Cizhou simply can't supply the Imperial Army the same way we're supplying the Libe armored cavalry. I'll be frank with you. If Biansha attacks again this autumn, or if Libe is hard-pressed for provisions come spring, then Cizhou will allocate the grain to the Libe armored cavalry before we allocate it to the Imperial Army. The candlelight in the study was dim. Zhou Gui lived frugally, dressing in simple clothes and eating simple fare. Other than on an occasion like the welcome feast he'd thrown for Shen Zichuan and Xiao Chia, his family dined on common dishes. During the year in which the region was beset by natural disasters, they had boiled and eaten tree bark, just like anyone else. At the moment, Suzhou seemed prosperous in comparison to the rest in Zhongbo, but in truth, it was still a shambles compared to the empire's other regions. Setting aside a portion of the city's grain for these new arrivals was something they had done under a great deal of pressure. The first time Xiao Qie left the city to face Lei Changming, Zhou Gui had brought up requesting the aid of the Libei armored cavalry. It hadn't been a spur-of-the-moment suggestion, but a notion deeply ingrained in his mind. The fall of Zhongbo had come up in their conversations countless times, both implied and stated outright. But outsiders would never understand how it had felt to live through it. Zhou Gui had developed a nervous disorder after the defeat. If he heard so much as a whistle at night, he would toss and turn for hours in a constant state of anxiety. The losses along the Chasha River had been more than devastating. Massacre. Massacre. This word echoed from Duanzhou all the way to Chudu. It had been on everyone's lips in those terrible days. To Chudu, the bloodbath had been merely a smudge of ink on a report from the front lines. But for Zhongbo, the loss of their homes and families had been all too real. It was only thanks to the Libei armored cavalry that Suzhou managed a narrow escape. In the eyes of Zhou Gui, of everyone in Suzhou, the Libei armored cavalry was of far greater importance than the imperial army. Xiao Jiming had descended from the heavens with his godly troops, swooping to their rescue, and that iron horse on river ice became their talisman against the certain death of the northern and eastern frontiers of the Zhou army at the hands of the Biansha horsemen. Lei Jingzhe had wanted to take Suzhou, but he hadn't intended to settle there long. He would have robbed Suzhou's granaries and immediately left to seek reward in Chudu. The ever-present possibility that Xiao Jiming would deploy his troops southward was the fear nipping at his heels. Xiao Jiming was said to have taken badly ill from the tainted grain, but no one had seen him with their own eyes. Those who counted on him didn't dare to believe it, and those who feared him didn't dare to bet on it. The old senior officials under Hai Liangyi were all wary of Xiao Fengshu, but their juniors in the ranks were more wary of Xiao Jiming. Silence reigned in the study. The candle flame flickered. Shen Zichuan felt his back and waist aching. Traces of Xiao Qie's bites still marked his collarbone, concealed beneath his clothes. Strangely enough, at such a serious moment, he suddenly remembered Xiao Qie's sweat-soaked face, his strong arms, and his gasping kisses along Shen Zichuan's neck. In all his considerations of Xiao Qie, he'd never once considered him lesser than Xiao Jiming. I knew I was going to see something in the chat after reading that. Like, sometimes the politics are politicking, and I totally get it. It's like, what do we have to say at this moment? And then I'm like, oh, okay. Someone's going to say something again. Shen Zichuan did not stay silent long. Though his mind wandered, it was only for a moment. I understand. Next year, Sa'an and I will return to you the exact amount of the grain lent to us when we arrived here. The color drained from Zhou Gui's face. He rushed to explain. Vice Commander, that's not what we... The issue I wanted to bring to your Excellency's attention is not that the amount of grain you've allocated to the Imperial Army is too little, but that it's too much. Shen Zichuan motioned for Zhou Gui to sit, then continued his explanation. The fact that Suzhou is willing to allocate such a significant amount of grain to the Imperial Army is proof of your sincerity. But as we mentioned earlier, the Imperial Army will only be relying on grain from Suzhou temporarily. In the future, The Imperial Army will supply its own military provisions and will not need to draw from Suzhou's granary. Zhou Gui was aware of his own shortcomings and didn't dare reply directly. He looked to Kong Ling. Cheng Feng oversaw the drafting of this booklet, so there are some matters he understands better than I. Cheng Feng, please explain to the vice commander. Kong Ling got to his feet, keeping one hand on the back of the chair for support. Instead of explaining, he asked a question. The vice commander is certain the Imperial Army will not lack for grain in the future. You also said the Northeast Provisions Trail will still be used as usual. In truth, we can think of no solution that would allow for this. Would the vice commander be so kind as to explain? Otherwise, we must insist the Imperial Army accept this grain. Shen Zichuan gently brushed the lid over the tea in his cup. Before that, I wish to ask both of you. Do you expect Suzhou to merely live off the land from now on? Suzhou is limited by its geography, Kong Ling replied. If we don't live off the land, how can we survive? What I see is the exact opposite. Shen Zichuan set down the teacup. It's true that Suzhou's position wasn't originally ideal. You have Li Bei to the north and Chazhou to the south. You are obstructed by Dunzhou and Duanzhou to the east, and restricted by Dancheng to the west. Suzhou didn't dare, nor was it able to, move as it pleased. But that was when Suzhou was subordinate to Chudu. Now that you've established a connection with Li Bei, Dancheng can no longer rely on Chudu's power and influence to force you to do its bidding. Meanwhile, Dunzhou is overrun with the bandits, and the honest folk who remain there will soon flee, leaving the place a hollow husk. When this happens, 3 of the walls enclosing Suzhou will have collapsed. The remaining, Chazhou, is not an obstacle, but an opportunity. Zhou Gui fidgeted in his seat, wanting to stand up again. Kneading away at his robe until the fabric under his palms was wrinkled, he began cautiously. You mean... Chazhou lies along a waterway that leads right to Hezhou. After the fall of Zhongbo, traveling merchants from Hezhou took advantage of the opportunity to peddle foodstuffs at exorbitant prices in Zhongbo, making quick and huge profits from bandits of all kinds. It would be a true shame if this route was only used to make someone else rich. But bandits run rampant in Chazhou too, Kong Ling pointed out, and they have connections with the Yan clan of Hezhou. They won't let us do business along that route for nothing. He grew more anxious as he spoke. Besides, what have we to trade? Compared to Hezhou, Suzhou is a remote hinterland. Grain, Shen Zichuan said. The moment he said it, Zhou Gui lurched to his feet. Absolutely not. If we did that, how would we be any better than those conscienceless thieves who conspired with the officials and merchants in Jueshi to resell imperial grain for private profit? Your Excellency, please hear me out. Shen Zichuan's gaze was steady, his manner so calm, Zhou Gui couldn't help but sit back down. The reason there are thieves in Jueshi and Hezhou reselling grain at exorbitant prices is the shortage of food all across Zhongbo. And Chazhou is the worst hit. In Chudu, 1 tael of silver will get you 2 dan of rice. The same tael of silver in Jueshi will get you 1 dan and 5 dough, 1/2 dan. And there's a footnote for dough, a volumetric measure for grain approximately equal to 10 liters. But in Chazhou, 1 tael of silver can only buy you 2 dough of rice, just 1/5 of the dan. The silver in the Chazhou bandits' coffers was all fleeced from the commoners, still left in Chazhou. Because of this, good citizens with their names on the household register are starving, and the number of people forced to turn to banditry out of desperation will only increase with time. Henry, I feel that. Yeah, I think you are correct. This novel really understands historical settings. It's literally always about the grain, which is about power. Yep. You definitely could make some, like, grain memes about this series. I don't know exactly how those would go, but I'm sure someone could think of something. Your Excellency, this is the same reason Lei Chongming, or in fact, Lei Jingzhe, could recruit such a large army within as little as 6 months. Now, if Cizhou is willing to sell grain to Chazhou at a price just slightly higher than you would sell to Chudu, you would actually be doing Chazhou a favor. Kongling frowned slightly. But if we sell grain to Chazhou, there will be a shortage in our own granary. If we have silver in our hands but no grain, will we not find ourselves in the same predicament Chazhou is in now? In that case, the unscrupulous grain merchants in Jueshi and Hezhou will be even more ruthless in their extortion. Hezhou is far away, Shen Zichuan replied. Even if you want to do business with them, there's no hurry to make those connections right now. But there's something else I'd like you to consider. I had some knowledge of Huaizhou when I left Chudu. Huaizhou contributed half the military provisions this year. They have an abundance of grain in their stores. The city of Dicheng, on the outskirts of Chudu, lies to the southwest of Huaizhou, and also has a direct connection to Jueshi's seaports. Meanwhile, since Huaizhou wishes to conduct trade through Dicheng, they're going to need money. Cizhou can sell its harvest to Chazhou at a markup, then buy the grain it needs from Huaizhou at a lower price. The profit can be used to fund other ventures, while your granary maintains a steady abundance. The grain you store may be provided to the Libe armored cavalry at a crucial moment, or kept in reserve for your own needs in Cizhou. Record keeping was one of the embroidered uniform guard's responsibilities, and entailed walking the streets and alleys and taking detailed notes of the prices of daily commodities. When Chen Zichuan had held the position of Southern Judge, he'd been in charge of the embroidered uniform guard's military craftsmen, and had perused their annual records regarding the various regions in the empire. Though Ge Qingqing had offered to make a copy, Shen Zichuan had instead spent an entire night committing the records to memory. Even then, he had been wary of the unknown future, unwilling to rely on sheets of paper to safeguard important information. It seemed now his fears had borne out. They'd escaped Chudu in such haste that they'd had no time to bring anything along. Even so, all the records, files, old registries, and books Shen Zichuan had read in his years in Chudu rode out of the gates with him. Zhou Gui pondered this. At length, he said, but if Huaizhou isn't willing... Yet the more Kongling thought, the more excited he became. No, it's feasible. Luoxia Pass lies to the east of Huaizhou. Local goods from the frontiers of Libei can be exported through it to Huaizhou. From there, it's a linear route to Jueshi's ports. He paced a circuit around the room, then slapped his thigh. That's right. We should have done this a long time ago. If Cizhou doesn't adapt to its circumstances, won't we still be trapped in the same cage as before? This could work. Shen Zichuan had never answered the question of how he would keep the Northeast Provisions Trail open for use, but Kongling was too preoccupied with this new proposal to pursue the matter. In the candlelight, he seemed to see the spark of hope for Cizhou's future. After the incident with Lei Chongming, Kongling had considered Shen Zichuan a man who would stoop to deception and trickery to achieve his goals. Now, all that was forgotten. Oh, Henry, are you saying people have made grain memes? For QJJ specifically? Eat the silver. Now all that was forgotten. He wanted to take hold of Shen Zichuan and give his thanks, but as he extended his hands, he remembered Xiao Chia and immediately retracted them. If we do this, even if we have a surplus of grain in years to come, we won't have to worry about it moldering in the granaries. Then let's discuss the garrison troops, Zhou Gui said from across the table, and the defense of the city walls. Sipping his hot tea, Shen Zichuan hadn't yet replied when Ding Tao poked his head in and waved vigorously at him from the doorway. Shen Zichuan rose and walked over. What is it? Ding Tao, who had stepped away earlier, had sprinted all the way back and was sweating profusely. Gongzi, Gongzi, they're here. Zhou Gui and Kong Ling came over as well, looking on as a very worked-up Ding Tao squeezed his eyes shut and burst into tears. As if sensing the words he'd yet to say, Shen Zichuan stepped out the door in a daze. Between sobs, Ding Tao choked out, Gongzi, the brothers are back, Qiao Tianya too, and Shen Zichuan strode into the courtyard, where darkness had descended. He still held the teacup in his hand, and the tea spilled as he walked, scalding his fingers red. But he had completely forgotten about it and took no notice. He walked all the way to the gates of the residence without stopping. It was a short journey, but he was sweating all over. A few cargo wagons were parked outside, and several tall figures stood spread out under the lanterns. The shortest was illuminated in profile where he stood resting by the carriage, still wrapped in his cloak. Shen Zichuan's chest heaved, and the rims of his eyes reddened, but with great effort, he held himself back, unwilling to lay his emotions bare here. Oh, Wolf, one of your most favorite moments of this volume? Okay, I'm excited. Henry, you're about to be so mad at whoever made Ding Tao cry. I think it's good tears this time. Ji Gong turned at the sound of his approach, nearly tripping over the stone steps when he caught sight of Shen Zichuan. His white hair was disheveled, and his lips quivered. Even before he called out, the tears were streaming down his face. Chuan, Ji Gong stumbled over his words as a child would, despite his white hair. He cursed himself for being so inarticulate as he anxiously beckoned. You. Shen Zichuan took the stairs in 2 strides and lunged forward to hold Ji Gong steady. The teacup crashed to the ground, forgotten. Ji Gong grabbed him by the arms and looked him over. He had lived his life first as an embroidered uniform guard in Chudu, and then as a blacksmith in Duanzhou before the Zhongbo catastrophe befell him, and he lost both wife and son. He always put on a tough act before others. Yet seeing Shen Zichuan now, he wept uncontrollably. Chuanar, Ji Gong scrubbed at his eyes with rough fingers and looked at Shen Zichuan over and over again. All the words he wanted to say were condensed to a single, I'm so glad you're all right. He was travel-worn and had thinned quite a bit. Shi Huilian's death weighed heavily on him, and his concern for what Shen Zichuan would encounter after leaving Chudu had propelled him all the way here, unable to eat or sleep. All that suffering had piled up on his already stooped back. He had long ceased to be the Ji Gong renowned across the land, but his emaciated form was still willing to shelter Shen Zichuan from the wind and rain. For his son, he could travel thousands upon thousands of li. He could fight all the formidable heroes of the nation. He asked for nothing but to see Shen Zichuan alive and well. How have you become so thin? Ji Gong could barely hold himself back. Oh, it's time to look at the art. Can you see? Yes, okay. We're looking at that. We're looking at their reunion, as is the name of the chapter. This is so sweet. Also, that was an incredible line, what you just repeated, Henry. His emaciated form was still willing to shelter Shen Sichuan through wind and rain. For his son, yeah. I can't think about that. Shifu. Shen Sichuan's voice trembled. Why has Shifu lost so much weight? It's just my old age. I get weary when I travel. Jigong dashed his tears away and said happily, I'm just fine now that I've seen you. Chao Tianya brushed the shards of the teacup aside and dropped to one knee. Intending to lighten the atmosphere, he smiled. Although the journey took a few extra months, I've done as my master bade me. So, master, how about a reward of food and wine? Shifu, let's take a seat before we talk. The courtyard, not big to begin with, now overflowed with people. Kong Ling ordered a table set up outside and told the kitchen to whip up some hot dishes, then served on horseback as a welcoming refreshment for the newly arrived embroidered uniform guard and Libe guards. On horseback was a type of tea, right? I forgot what that is, but it's still funny to me. Chao Tianya chased after Ding Tao's plump sparrow with a pair of chopsticks. We've worn thin from all that running around, but this one's gotten fat and shiny from eating out of your hands. Are you going to serve it up to go with our wine? Ding Tao, who had been overjoyed at the reunion, scooped up the sparrow and snapped, No. Even starving as he was, Gu Jin didn't hesitate to knock Chao Tianya's chopsticks aside between hurried mouthfuls of rice. Are you itching for a beating? Why do you have to pick on a kid? You had the same rations as everyone else on the road, Chen Yang said over the rim of his cup. Why are you so hungry? Gu Jin gave away all his food to the children begging along the way. As the newest member of the group, Fei Sheng knew these were his future comrades, so he chose his words artfully, saying only good things. This brother is something of a people's hero. He spent plenty of good copper buying those kids buns. You can rescue a soul from an emergency, but not from endless poverty, Chen Yang said earnestly. You've got to change that habit of yours. You go soft-hearted whenever you see tears shed. Everyone's going hungry these days. I'm not telling you not to do good deeds, but you must know where to draw the line. Ding Tao piped up from the side. You spent all your money? Jinge, didn't you say the last time you'd hand it over to me? I'll save it for you so you can get yourself a wife. I told you to leave it with me long ago. I'm great at keeping records. As he spoke, he fished out his little book. It's written right here that you borrowed 3 copper coins from me during the New Year's holidays 3 years ago to buy wine. Of course, it's not that I care about this little bit of money. I don't. Really, Ge, I'm just... Without pausing between bites, Gu Jin stuffed the cotton he always carried right into his right ear. Excuse me. Into his right ear, and turned it toward Ding Tao. Is that wine from back home? Give me a jar. 3 cups, and no more. Chao Tianya had already set his chopsticks down. We have to go report to my master in a moment. Look at you, drinking yourself drunk. Have you forgotten how his lordship punished you the last time? At a time like this, I'd advise you to act with prudence. Chao Tianya was usually the first to laugh and joke, but as a former judge of the embroidered uniform guard, he could assume a truly imposing air when he wished to. His tone was mild, but his words were pointed. Gu Jin frowned, irritated, but nodded. I just want a taste. I haven't had a drink in months. Oh, Wolf, the horse, what is it, on horseback? It's Xiao Papa's wedding wine. Okay, thank you. I totally forgot what it was, so thank you. Gradually, the chattering Ding Tao fell silent. He was the youngest among them, and the whole group regarded him as a little brother. None of the older men had ever been stingy in buying him candy. As such, he feared no one and dared get close to everyone. He had a natural gift of discernment and was particularly sensitive to people's emotions. He could tell his older brothers weren't as relaxed as they appeared. He cradled his little sparrow in both hands and sat quietly off to the side, making neither noise nor fuss. They finished their meals as Kong Ling arranged for servants to clear out a courtyard and its surrounding rooms so the travel-worn guests had a place to rest. It was nearing midnight. Shen Zichuan had Ding Tao lead Ji Gong away to retire for the night. The lead guards all had reports to make, and stood in single file on the veranda, waiting to be called inside. "Everyone, come in and take a seat," said Shen Zichuan. "We can discuss it together." When all of them had settled with Shen Zichuan in the seat of honor, he began with Chen Yang. "Did the collection of the military provisions in Huaizhou go smoothly?" Chen Yang sat up straight and organized his thoughts for a moment. "No. As Gongzi predicted before I left, the Huaizhou officials tried everything to stonewall us and stall the collection. The fighting in Libei was intense at the time, and my master's 2-day deadline was just around the corner. I was burning with anxiety. It was Lord Jiang, the defender of Luoxiao Pass, who stepped up to vouch for me. Only then did Huaizhou finally release the grain. Fortunately, we made it in time, and as the provisions trail leads straight to Libei, the delay didn't affect the fighting." At this point, he fell silent for a moment. "I saw our Shizu back in Libei. He was severely injured." When he heard my master had been ambushed back in Chudu, he wanted to lead the troops out to bring him home. Unfortunately, his lordship the prince overruled him. Shen Zichuan asked for no further details, but turned to Gu Jin. "You came to Cizhou to oversee the collection of grain back then. Compared to the prefect of Huaizhou, Zhou Gui is much easier to deal with. So why do you also look troubled?" Gu Jin looked somewhat taken aback at being addressed directly. Everyone noticed his distraction. But Shen Zichuan was looking at him, so after a little hesitation, he replied, "It's true I didn't encounter any difficulties when I came to Cizhou to supervise the transportation of military provisions. I went along with the troops and delivered the grain to the front lines well in advance of the deadline. I even saw his lordship the prince in the eastern range of the Hongyan Mountains. He spoke at a measured pace, and when he stopped, he paused for a very long time. I heard my master had left Chudu, so I'd been waiting for him to return home. It was only when I ran into Chen Yang when he came to deliver the provisions to the army that I learned that my master had stopped in Cizhou. After that, I rushed over here." Libei was just north of Cizhou. Logically, Gu Jin and Chen Yang should have arrived before Chao Tianya. Shen Zichuan tapped his fingers lightly on the tabletop. He set this question aside and addressed Chao Tianya. "And you?" "I want the details." Elbows draped over the armrests of his chair, Chao Tianya rattled off his answer. "I raced off to search for Shifu and Xiansheng on your orders. I followed the trail to the inner chamber of the Shui Manor, at which point I discovered Shui Xiuzhuo had moved Shifu to the broker house on Donglong Street. But there was no trace of Xiansheng there. We were too late. And after you left, we couldn't leave through the city gate, so we had to lay low in Chudu." He shot a glance at Fei Sheng. It just so happened that this guy was also hiding from the noble clan's searches with his people. We tried every means to get out, but Han Chung had the city sealed up so tight, not even a drop of water could trickle through. Left with nowhere to go, we hid at the Marquis's Plum Blossom Manor. Well, as luck would have it, I found a map there with the layout of all Chudu's public ditches. The very same one his lordship had tricked out of the Pan clan. Xiao Chia had acquired this item from Pan Lin during the banquet he'd hosted to celebrate his promotion to the rank of Marquis. At that time, he had obtained the plans only as a contingency. Yet in an unexpected turn of events, it became the key to Chao Tianya's escape from Chudu. Here, Fei Sheng took up the telling. We crawled our way out through the public ditches. He gestured to make his point. The public ditches in many of the streets are newly dug. I don't know if this was his lordship's intent, but they're all narrow at the top and much wider inside. There are even some candles and field rations stored in the dry corners. Over 50 of us traveling together relied on those rations as we tried to shake the 8th grade battalions for more than 10 days before we finally made it out of Chudu on the side closest to Mount Feng. Once we were out, we realized Han Cheng had set up checkpoints on all the public roads going to and from the 8 cities around Chudu. Chao Tianya continued. We pawned all the gold, silver, and jade pendants we had on us and disguised ourselves as traveling merchants. That's making me think of a certain other book series. We made a detour and went south to Chuancheng, and then around to Chazhou, then hurried from Chazhou over to Sizhou. When we arrived in Chazhou a fortnight ago, we got word that Han Cheng had delivered the imperial heir to the palace. But news was hard to come by after leaving Chazhou, so we haven't heard what happened after. If we want the details, we'll have to wait for Ge Qingqing's letter. No one disturbed Shen Zichuan as he contemplated Chao Tianya and Fei Sheng's news. Shen Zichuan could hear Ding Tao's footsteps outside on the veranda. He waited until the boy appeared at the door before saying, "The two of you must be tired. Go with Ding Tao and rest for tonight." Fei Sheng was a discerning man. He knew a dismissal when he heard one. He was in no hurry to profess his loyalty tonight. He rose in one smooth move and, alongside Chao Tianya, bade farewell to their master and withdrew. The candle flame flickered and popped. Since making his brief report, Gu Jin hadn't lifted his head or uttered a sound. He submerged himself in the darkness, the writhing shadows from the candle falling upon his face like two figures scuffling with one another. Shen Zichuan remained remarkably cool-headed. Did something happen to you two in Li Bei? Shen Yang propped his elbow on the armrest and wiped a hand over his face. At last he said, "I've been staying close to Shizi, so nothing really happened to me. It's Gu Jin." In the unbearable silence, Gu Jin undid his clasps, shrugged off his upper garment, and turned around to expose a nasty wound on his back. This matter should have been reported directly to my master, but he won't be back for a few days. As per his instructions back in Chudu, I'll report to Gongzi first. I arrived at the front lines, where the fighting was the most intense. His lordship the prince and Commander Zuo are both safe. After they finished inspecting the military provisions, I temporarily took up my old position in the vanguard of the reconnaissance squad, clashing with the cavalry of the Hanma tribe day in and day out. On one of those days, I can't remember which, we encountered an ambush as I was leading the squad back from the eastern mountain range. The wound on his back had festered, the rotting skin already scraped away in several spots. Blood seeped through the bandages. I was hit by an arrow, but managed to escape with my life. I thought we'd been ambushed by a party from the Hanma tribe, so I led my remaining 200 men around the grasslands where the Hanma tribe lurks to make our way back through Readalong Banner's swamps. But we were ambushed again that very night in Readalong Banner. Gujin pulled his robe back on and secured his clasps. Gongzi, I got my start as a scout. It's because of my keen eyes and ears that I was chosen by his lordship, the prince, to be a guard. I may not be as sharp as I was after all these quiet years in Chudu, but after my master's admonition, I've never dared to be negligent, especially on the battlefield, where I tread with a lot more caution. That night, I issued all the orders for our patrol routes on the spot. I never discussed it with anyone, yet we were ambushed twice. I started to suspect the Hanma tribe had someone on the inside. During our second escape, I discovered there had been snake venom on the arrowhead. Ding Tao covered his steel needles with this poison in the past. It comes from the western range of the Hongyan Mountains. At the time, my back was festering pretty bad, and the enemy was right on our tail in the swamps. After being bitten by some poisonous bugs, I was in bad shape. By dawn, I had a fever. At this point, Gujin stopped. He spoke dully, pausing many times as if checking himself lest he speak a single word wrong. He knew the implications of what he was about to say. Our horses drowned in the swamp, and I couldn't walk. The Libe Armored Cavalry's base camp lies only 10 li or so south of Readalong Banner, yet strangely, we encountered no patrols that day. I sent my trusted assistant general ahead first while I remained to await reinforcements, but even after I waited through dawn the next day, no one came. I was worried the spy would make use of the opportunity to infiltrate base camp, so I pushed myself to hurry back. I made it back, escaping by the skin of my teeth, but when I arrived, I was stripped of my blade and locked up. I spent the entire night in the prison shack where the Biansha prisoners of war were held. On the second day, I was taken to the commander's tent and court-martialed, with the general of the camp, Guo Wei Li, presiding. Gujin omitted the details of the trial. He had no desire to recall it. It had been to him not a physical pain, but the collapse of some long-held ideal. He continued in a voice so soft as to be almost imperceptible. They accused me of being in covert communication with the Hanma tribe and plotting to wipe out another vanguard squad further east of Readalong Banner that night. They stripped me of my rank and demanded that I confess whether I'd done it on someone else's instructions. Well, I can't confess to something I didn't do. I asked why the camp ignored my 2 consecutive requests for reinforcements. They claimed they never received them. According to military law, I should have undergone a joint trial by 3 generals before the commander-in-chief personally authorized my execution. But Guo Wei Li insisted that Shizi had yet to recover from his injuries, and that he had the authority to act on the heir's behalf. If not for Chen Yang arriving in the nick of time, I doubt I'd be standing before Gongzi now. Shen Zichuan reached for a silver needle and picked off the top of the candle wick. The flame went out. He stared at the dark candle, which seemed to be shedding waxen tears. Countless thoughts flashed through his mind. He didn't need Chen Yang and Gujin to remind him that, according to the letter of appointment from the Ministry of War, Guo Wei Li had been personally promoted from the lowest ranks over the years by Xiao Jiming himself. If Xiao Jiming is up to something, I'm gonna, eat this book. I don't know what I'm going to do with myself. That's not good. And that's also something that I just have not been anticipating or thinking about as, any kind of possibility. I've just been like, no, there's no way that he would do anything to them. He's gotta be a good guy. Just gotta. That's all. Um, so it's probably more complicated than that, but, you know, I'm concerned now. Xiao Qiye followed Lei Jingzhe's trail all the way to the north side of the camp where they'd first encountered him. He dismounted and grabbed a handful of soil and squinted at the terrain ahead. Tantai Hu surveyed the mountain range dominating the horizon. If they go any farther north, they're going to step across Li Bei's borders. They won't dare head there, so they'll have no choice but to split up and flee. Master, he's leading us on a wild goose chase. We'll wear ourselves out if we keep chasing them like this. He's indeed doing just that. Xiao Qiye opened his hand and let the soil fall through his fingers. They're splitting off in small streams that will slip through our large net. But if we split up now, we'll fall into his trap. He's not willing to fight me head on. He can't handle the full momentum of the Imperial Army, and he's worried his own men will lose focus and morale. But they know this area well. They'll do anything they can think of to lure us into splitting up so they can pick us off one by one. We don't have enough cavalry. Tantai Hu examined the terrain. This son of a bitch is too crafty. We're in no hurry. Xiao Qiye stood up. Meng returned from his own reconnaissance and landed on Xiao Qiye's shoulder, perching on his master in the night breeze. The wind rustled the tall grass, scattering a few strands of willow leaves. Of the 5 categories of weapons, fire is the most intense. Xiao Qiye mounted Snowcrest again. We'll smoke him out. Tantai Hu followed suit and got on his horse. But this area is dense with trees and brush. If it burns, the fire might spread to the grasslands of Li Bei. Xiao Qiye laughed out loud astride his horse. I'm not asking you to set a fire here. Go. Hit every town and village along the main road. Have them put up notices announcing that anyone who harbors bandits will be executed on the spot. However, if they report the bandits to the Imperial Army, they'll be rewarded in copper. I'll pay out for each man they give up. And tell them this. Sizhou will be posting enlistment notices for the new garrison troops soon. If they join up, they'll get 3 square meals a day, if nothing else. And any informants who have been rewarded by the Imperial Army will get priority treatment. Since Lei Jingzhe wants to hide, I'll force him to expose himself. Tantai Hu hesitated, but couldn't keep quiet. Aren't we out of money? Report the figures to Lanzhou when we get back. Xiao Qiye urged Snowcrest forward, then reined him in and looked back to say, Can your Argongza really not scrounge up a few handfuls of copper coins? Tantai Hu looked embarrassed. Xiao Qiye twirled his thumb ring and said coolly, Oh. Interesting. That's the end of the chapter. The very long chapter. It's a perfect time to take a break right now. I'm going to be thinking about the implications of what we learned. Just kind of stewing in my brain, hoping that Xiao Jiming is not up to what it sounds like he could possibly be up to, you know? I'm sure there's a secret third person doing stuff, because there always is, right? But I don't know. Nothing is out of bounds. Nothing is like, you know, I don't know how Tong Jioqing just does things, but I imagine that, like, there's not some sort of, like, plot armor is the wrong word, but when it's, like, I don't know what to call it exactly, but, like, there's not a guarantee that, like, oh, this character they really like is going to be good. I hope he is. I hope to be wrong, but like I said, I'm just concerned now. So I'm gonna take my break and walk that off, and I'll be back in about 10 minutes. Hello, I have returned. Henry, I love your last comment. Xiao Jiming, you're so dilthy, please don't be evil. I too hope that he's not evil. A thought occurred to me, about how there's some part, I forget if it was last volume or maybe before even, but there's some part that's describing Xiao Jiming and Xiao Qie, and it kind of says that like Xiao Qie much more greatly resembles his father than Xiao Jiming, and it was like Xiao Jiming didn't like didn't really resemble him, and it was said that he looked more like their mother, and it kind of made us wonder, like, what if he's not actually a son of Xiao Fengshu? What if he has a different father? And, like, what if he is doing something sketchy? I wonder if it has something to do with his actual father and maybe some sort of, like, power play. But that is just, like, totally out of left field. Like, I have no evidence for that, but it's just a thought that I had. But yes, you're correct, Henry. Then again, Xiao Qie experiencing betrayal from the one place he never imagined it would come, his family, compelling. That is compelling, as unfortunate as it would be. Which is why I'm afraid of the possibility of it happening. Like, no bets are off. Like, anything could happen. So, we are on page 39 for chapter 114, which is called Intensity of Flames. Lei Jingzhe had gone hungry for a whole day. He squatted near a pigsty with a bowl in his hand, shoving his hard-earned cornmeal porridge into his mouth with a single-minded ferocity. Beside him was his subordinate, a rascal around the same age as Ding Tao, but built like an ox. The young man wolfed down his food as ravenously as Lei Jingzhe. A burly cook poked his head out of the open kitchen window above them and banged a ladle on the rim of his pot. There's still some broth left. Want it? Better get your ass over here quick. Yes, yes. The boy, whose name was Li Xiong, Bear, dashed to the window with his mouth still full of porridge. Wiping his lips with the back of his hand, he held out his bowl, eyes trained on the clear broth in the pot. You've got quite the appetite. The cook tipped out the last bits of broth. Tell your older brother to get a job. Then you won't have to starve like this. My brother's gonna do great things. Seeing some soup about to drip from the side of the bowl, Li Xiong swiped it with the finger and sucked it clean. The cook dabbed at his forehead with his apron. Seeing this boy, who looked like a sturdy young calf, he wiped the sweat off Li Xiong's brow, too, muttering, Your face is as dirty as the bottom of a pot, and I'll bet no one's taking care of you at home. Hey, you there. What are you doing with yourself all day? At least clean this kid up a bit. Still chewing on pickled vegetables, Lei Jingzhe flashed the cook a good-natured smile. Li Xiong trotted over and poured his broth into Li Jingzhe's bowl, as if offering up a priceless treasure. You have it, Ge. Good lad. Lei Jingzhe accepted it readily, then threw his head back and downed it in a gulp. He peered at the sun overhead, sweating in its scorching heat. He squinted his stinging eyes against the light, shifted his feet, and cursed under his breath. Motherfucker. Motherfucker, Li Xiong parroted, shifting to shield Lei Jingzhe from the sun. Lei Jingzhe propped an elbow up on his knee. How's it look out there? Li Xiong craned his neck and peered around before answering in a small voice. They're still searching. Face betraying his irritation, Lei Jingzhe hung his head, exposing a scorpion tattoo on the back of his neck, the tail drenched with sweat. He had dispersed his people after fleeing Cizhou, taking with him only this dolt of a lad he had raised himself, then snuck into a small town along the public road and watched as the Imperial Army ran back and forth looking for him. He was waiting for Xiao Qie to lose patience and scatter his troops for the search. But Xiao Qie wasn't impatient in the least. Instead, he had set a fire along the road with his bounty notices, stirring up panic among Lei Jingzhe's men. The reward the Imperial Army is offering is pathetic. That copper's not enough to pay for our brother's drinks, Li Xiong said, puzzled. Ge, why are so many people stepping forward? It's because it's small. Lei Jingzhe's eyes gleamed, sharp under sweat-darkened brows. The price he's offering is perfect. Had Xiao Qie offered a bounty of a few silver taels, the common folk might not have been willing to come forward. Zhongbo had been hit with disaster after disaster in recent years, and bandits were rampant. A higher reward suggested a difficult task, as well as danger that might well cost them their lives. A bounty of a few handfuls of copper coins was a different story. This made it a trivial matter to inform the Imperial Army of any traces of the bandits. Not to mention, no one would be the wiser about who had come forward, since copper coins could be spent in a flash. Even if the bandits returned to seek vengeance, they had little chance of tracking the informants down. Then what should we do? Face dripping from the heat, Li Xiong looked at Lei Jingzhe. Ge, Why don't we just fucking go for it? He only has 20,000 men. Lei Jingzhe, too, was restless. He knew what Xiao Qie intended. The man wanted to flush them out and force them to act. But Lei Jingzhe was fully aware that he was leading a motley crew cobbled together from 2 prefectures. None of them had received formal military training. They would be trounced the moment they abandoned their current advantage and faced off against the well-equipped imperial army. Yet hiding forever wasn't an option either. Lei Jingzhe could lay low, but how long could those roughshod subordinates of his keep it together? Sweating, Lei Jingzhe stared at the muck under his feet. That man's underhanded. He won't play fair. He hasn't sent anyone to block us from going north. That's exactly where he wants us to go. He knows Li Bei waits for us there, and he's gambling that we won't dare cross their borders. But damn it! Choking with pent-up frustration, Lei Jing just spat on the ground. He really didn't dare to do it. We'll wait here one more night. Lei Jingzhe jerked to his feet. Go. Tell you are to spread the word to the others still in town that we'll leave immediately if things look bad. Worst comes to worst, we'll retreat to Mount Law. I have all the patience in the world to play this little game with Xiao Qie. Waiting for Xiao Qie to be impatient is like waiting for Tasha and June to stop being horny. You'll be waiting a while. Sounds about right. Xiao Qie was eating, making a meal of a few steamed buns and some cheap pickled vegetables. Seated on a wooden post for tethering horses, he watched his soldiers speaking with commoners who had come forth with tips, issuing them paper slips that could be exchanged for copper coins. Master, Tantai Hu greeted as he walked over. He really is something, spreading his people so thin. How can he give orders this way? He can't be going around knocking on doors, can he? He's a bandit chief. I'm sure he has his ways. Xiao Qie scratched Meng, who was perched on his shoulder. The Gur falcons we raise in Li Bei are also capable of passing military intelligence swiftly. We've captured quite a few of his people now, Tantai Hu reported. What shall we do with them? Kill them. Tantai Hu looked over at where the bandits were held, then back at Xiao Qie. He lowered his voice. But I've heard some of them are sons from honest families. Are we to kill them all? Xiao Qie glanced at him. Since they went to Mount Law to bow at Lei Jingzhe's feet and join the bandits, they should have expected this day would come. I'm here to eradicate bandits. There's no reason for me to show mercy to the enemy. Let me ask you this. If everyone with a mouth says they're from an honest family, which of them do you believe, and which do you condemn? Tantai Hu was quiet. Xiao Qie stood and watched as Meng launched himself from his shoulder and flew away. I know you're thinking of the Bianxia horsemen. But Lao Hu, don't misplace your sympathies. You've been in the army a long time. I shouldn't have to tell you this. Can't you figure it out yourself? Tantai Hu hung his head and made to kneel. Stand up. Xiao Qie patted his shoulder. You're a general leading his soldiers now, not a squad leader standing guard at the city gate of Dongzhou. Don't get mixed up. Xiao Qie was a generous superior, but he was also exacting, and made sure the guards around him knew where they stood. The last time Chen Yang stood idly by, Xiao Qie's treatment had left him more upset than if he'd been whipped. But guards and generals were 2 different things. Why didn't Xiao Qie let Chen Yang lead the troops? Zhao Hui, his counterpart at Xiao Jiming's side, was a valiant general. Xiao Qie clearly had other considerations. Though Xiao Qie hadn't raised his voice, or even frowned, Tantai Hu was shamefaced nonetheless. None of them could get a handle on Xiao Qie's true thoughts. Yet even when Xiao Qie used such a relaxed tone, Tantai Hu began to reflect on the error of his ways. That's the end of the chapter. Henry, who's always eating? So we are on page 45 for chapter 115, which is called Destiny. Let me just see really quick. Yeah, this is, a longish chapter as well. Swing after swing, the Imperial Army's blades pressed toward them. The soil underfoot was already soaked in blood. One bandit was pinned to the ground, listening to the never-ending screams of his compatriots, his own pants dark where he had wet himself. The dull edge of a blade pressed against the back of his neck, and his nose and mouth were smeared with bloody mud, choking him until tears and mucus flowed. "I don't know," he cried in terror. "I really don't know where he is." Lei Jingzhe was suspicious by nature. He had been secretive about his whereabouts, even back on Mount Luo. Other than his most trusted aides, no one knew exactly where along the roads he was hiding. Oh, yeah, Xiao Qie was eating. He ate. Gotcha. Tantai Hu scraped muck off the sole of his boots. "Since you know nothing, why are you wasting our time? Take him away." Someone hauled on the rope binding the bandit's hands behind his back, dragging him toward the execution spot. He kicked desperately, glancing at the headless corpses lying to either side of him. He could feel the blade at his nape turning over, its sharp edge sending shivers down his spine. As Tantai Hu lifted the sword, he suddenly burst into sobs. "Liu Er, sir, I know where Liu Er is." Tantai Hu paused. Is this person a trusted aide of Lei Jingzhe? Yes, a trusted aide. The bandit's chest heaved as he stared wide-eyed at the blade hanging above him. "Liu Er is our carrier pigeon. He passes on all Lei Jingzhe's orders. He's the one who sent a messenger to me when I was hiding out west with my men." After most of the night, Tantai Hu had finally managed to pry some information from these bandits' mouths. He hoisted the bandit up. "Where's this Liu Er now?" "In Bianshui town. The information I got a few days back came from Bianshui town. If you look for him now, you'll find him there for sure." Bianshui town was just a few miles away. This, Tantai Hu thought, didn't bode well. They had searched the town many times already. If the enemy was there, he'd been alerted long ago. He dropped the bandit and strode off to report to Xiao Qie. The Imperial Army promptly changed direction and raced to Bianshui town. They blocked off all the exits and searched from house to house, detaining any recent arrivals of unknown origin, and anyone who wasn't on a household register. They had the bandit look at each of their faces, but Liu Er and Lei Jingzhe were nowhere among them. By now, dawn was creeping over the horizon. Fearing Xiao Qie would take out his anger on him, the bandit racked his brain for suggestions. Liu Er has lots of men under him. They're his eyes and ears. Whenever he heads out for battle, they spread out all around him to help relay news to Lei Jingzhe. If they're not here now, it's because they heard you were coming and fled. You've blocked all the roads to the south, and we don't dare venture north. All that's left is to retreat east. If you give chase now, you'll catch up to them for sure." Will they? Although Tantai Hu despised a spineless coward who sold out his master to save his own sorry life, he dutifully reported the bandit's words to Xiao Qie. Sitting atop his horse, Xiao Qie considered for a moment. "Take half your men and follow them along the eastern side of the woods on the mountain. They're now birds that will startle at the twang of a bowstring. Intimidate them a little, and they'll be so panicked they won't be able to turn around and engage us properly. Hit them hard. Even if they've got 1,000 people, they're scattered soldiers without a commander. They should pose no problem for you." Tantai Hu acknowledged his orders, only to see Xiao Qiye gather the remaining men. If that's the case, why doesn't Master wait for me here? There's no need for you to go out yourself. Look at Lei Jingzhe's pattern of behavior. He's not just paranoid, he's terrified of death. Whatever we've thought of, he'll have thought of it too. If they've nowhere to go but east, he'll go, but not with such a large contingent of troops. They're too big a target and too obvious. Xiao Qiye gripped his riding crop. He didn't scruple to use Lei Changming as live bait for the first time, and he won't hesitate to use those 1,000 bandits now. Don't worry, just head east. I'll take the rest of the men and cut him off. It had been scorching the past 2 days. Under the blazing heat of the sun, the bandits, already churning with anxiety, grew even more restless. They squatted in clusters in the mountainous woods. No one had seen any sign of Lei Jingzhe, and they loudly questioned Liu Er, who was standing on a protruding rock. "You've got a seat at the table, don't you? Surely Master Liu knows more than we do about the whereabouts of our deputy chief. Where is he? Tell us." Liu Er stuffed tobacco into his pipe, but couldn't manage to find a flint. He squatted on the rock and looked up into the clear, cloudless sky. It was too bright. Everything was laid bare beneath it, with nowhere to hide. "Well, I'm here to pass on the message, aren't I?" He clicked his tongue. "The deputy chief says go home." A man stood up and said in a booming voice, "The Imperial Army has captured a few hundred of the brothers who follow me. I still don't know if they're alive or dead. I'm waiting for the deputy chief to come up with some way to save my men, and all he's got to say is go home? Ain't that just tucking our tails between our legs and running scared?" Unhappy, he went on. "All of us were big names back on Mount Luo, and we followed the deputy chief to Cizhou so we could eat and drink as we pleased. But look at us now. We've all become cowards, tortoises hiding in our shells. I'm so fucking pissed I could spit. It's just a bit of bad luck." Liu Er looked like a shrewd old monkey, and he had a similarly circumspect way of handling things. He had plenty to complain about regarding Lei Jingzhe's most recent orders, but he would never say so. Attempting to smooth things over, he said, "Even if you return to Mount Luo now, you'll still be a big name. Who'll dare say otherwise? But even a warhorse will stumble from time to time. One defeat is just a little setback. Report the men you've lost to the leaders later, and get the deputy chief to cough up some silver to make it up to you. He's not going to stiff you." "Who gives a damn about some silver?" the man, Ding Niu, cried. "Those men were my brothers. Are brothers so easily replaced nowadays? Haven't you seen the notices the Imperial Army posted? Cizhou wants to rebuild its garrison troops, and they're offering meals and farmland. Why would anyone give up the chance at a position with them to join us? Maybe if they were kicked in the head by a donkey. Right now, we have a lot more men than the Imperial Army. We should have stood our ground and fought them the first time we ran into them outside Cizhou's gates. The deputy chief is a coward. What the fuck was he afraid of? Now look at the spot we're in. We didn't even fight, yet we've already lost." He spat into the dirt. Sounds of agreement rang out all around. Liu Er squinted, deepening the creases around his eyes as he spoke. "The deputy chief is just being cautious. The Imperial Army is well equipped. Look at their armor. It's so polished, it shines. If we really come to blows, we might not be their match. They're nothing more than donkey shit that looks a little shiny on the outside." Ding Niu ground his spittle into the dirt with the sole of his shoe. "What kind of soldiers are the Imperial Army, anyway? How many battles have they fought? They can't fight for shit. They fought once against the 8 great battalions on the border of Zhongbo. Can that even be considered a battle? A pissing contest, more like. Whoever stands the fucking longest wins. Laughter broke out all around. Ding Niu noisily cleared his throat and tugged at his collar, revealing a chest burned red from the sun. If you ask me, there's no reason to leave in a hurry. Suzhou is a gold mine. If we miss out this time, it'll be harder to lay our hands on it the next. The Imperial Army is going around posting notices everywhere to get common folk to tip them off, but that just means they're afraid of us, no? If not, they can bring it on. We're all regrouped here, and we have 5,000 or 6,000 people. We can give the Imperial Army a huge headache if we fight them with guerrilla tactics here in the mountains. Liu Er neither kicked up a fuss with Ding Niu, nor made a new decision. Rubbing the pipe in his hand, he said, "The deputy chief said to go back. If you still want to fight them, tell him yourself." Ding Niu sneered. He's a cowering tortoise, hiding his head under his crotch. How am I supposed to tell him when I can't even find him? He doesn't dare show his face. What's he afraid of? Is a spy from the Imperial Army hiding among the brothers? Bah! His anger was in earnest. The man who had taken an arrow for Lei Jingzhe when he fled Xiaoqiye had been none other than this man's prospective brother-in-law. His little sister was just as burly as he was, and the young lady had struggled to find a good match. It hadn't been easy to find a man who treated her well. They had planned to hold the wedding at the end of the year. Who would have expected Lei Jingzhe to use him as a human shield? Ding Niu hated Lei Jinghe for being oh my god, I can say his name. Lei Jingzhe for being stone-hearted, and he resented him even more for subjecting his men to their current humiliation. I'll repeat exactly what the deputy chief said. Liu Er got to his feet and knocked his pipe against his hip. Right now, we're the vanguard squad. We don't have as many people as before, but we're still worlds apart from these minor bandits we came across along the way. If we can slip out of Suzhou's borders within 5 days and meet at the relay station in Dunzhou, we'll be back in our own territory. We'll have nothing to fear then, even if the Imperial Army wants to pursue us that far. When he saw the fury on the man's face, he continued. Of course, the deputy chief is still hurrying over here. Whether we stay or go is open for discussion. The Mount Law bandits had initially been gathered from various mountain strongholds. Although Lei Chongming had been headstrong, he was generous to the men he called brothers, showering them with meat, wine, money, and women. If they made a mistake, they merely had to grovel a little and plead for mercy, and the matter would be dropped. Lei Jingzhe was different. Not only did he rarely show himself, he was severe in meting out punishments. 9 out of 10 wrongdoers were slated for death once he caught them. His reign relied on intimidation. Those who feared him greatly outnumbered those who respected him. Now, in the face of such desperate circumstances, it was inevitable his men would start to get other ideas. If someone else could take a turn at being the emperor, surely the same went for the chief of the bandits. He who is capable is qualified. Watching Liu Er spin like a weathercock as he tried to avoid offending either side, Ding Niu said, "Fine, the deputy chief isn't here, and he's telling us to flee by ourselves. He can be a two-faced coward, but we can't. The Imperial Army is still at Bianshui town, yes? Liu Er, you better not fucking leave any traces behind. We use this spot as our base camp and harass them in small groups. We know our way around these mountains. As soon as the Imperial Army gathers their forces and turns around to engage us, we'll run back here. If they dare pursue us into the mountains, we'll take them all down. An army like that won't hold out for more than a few days against those kinds of cat and mouse tactics. Once we've tired them out, we'll charge our way down and beat the shit out of them. If we flatten the Imperial Army, the city of Suzhou will fall into our hands, won't it? So how about it? Are we doing this? Fired up by his speech, the bandits erupted in cheers of agreement. For the past few days, they had been living like vermin, detested by all. Not only were they hunted like rats by the Imperial Army, now they also had to be wary of unarmed commoners. They could neither eat nor sleep in peace. When had they ever been made to endure such hardship back on Mount Luo? Yes, we'll follow Ding Daga's lead. Pleased, Ding Niu laughed and nodded in satisfaction. All of us here have brothers who were captured by the Imperial Army. Now it's time to get our revenge. Oh, hi, Vase of Peonies. Don't worry about missing the stream today. I'm sorry you're not feeling good. I'm glad you'll be able to catch up for Wednesday. But yeah, don't ever feel bad for missing a stream. If Xiao Qiye dares to kill one of our men, we'll kill 10 of his. Who knows? When we occupy Cizhou and take his little brother captive, Xiao Jiming might even try to cozy up to us. The bandits were in high spirits, and for a moment, everyone was talking over one another about the good life they could look forward to after occupying Cizhou. Ding Niu was walking on air from the praise, his confidence in this plan growing with every moment. His thoughts were already leaping ahead to bringing his younger sister over and finding her another husband, one even better than the man who died. At that point, he was struck with a bolt of inspiration. Just did something weird. I want to make sure I'm still connected. Okay, it stopped recording for a second and it started again, but I think we're good. That was weird. Where the heck was I? Why not have her marry Xiao Qiye? Not only was he handsome, he was taller than Ding Niu, had an excellent build. Maybe we're good. Maybe we're good now. I don't know. I've been having this problem sometimes. And I try to alleviate it a little bit, but there's like so many things that I have to plug into my laptop, and I do use a laptop for streaming, and it gets a little bit, I think it gets a little upset sometimes. But you can hear and see me okay now, right? Henry, Xiao Jiming is trying to silence you, the fuck. Hopefully it's not him. Xiao Jiming, you might not be bad at all. Okay, cool. Alright, let's try that again. Ding Niu was picturing the children and grandchildren that would fill his house when he saw the apprentice on sentry duty scrambling up from the foot of the mountain. His face was pale with fright as he announced, "The Imperial Army is here." Liu Er backed away into the long grass in an attempt to flee, but Ding Niu grabbed the wily old fart and lugged him off the ground. "You tipped the Imperial Army off?" he demanded with a glare. Hunched with his long arms dangling and his white eyebrows almost trailing to the ground, Liu Er frantically shook his head. "It wasn't me. How could it be me? If I did it, I wouldn't have come." Ding Niu set Liu Er back on the ground and braced himself before pronouncing, "Great. Since they've come calling at our door, we'll go out and meet them." Lei Jingzhe galloped down the road at a furious pace. He had already skirted around the woods on the eastern side of the mountain and was presently circling back. With Ding Niu, Liu Er, and the rest of their group occupying the Imperial Army, more than half of their troops would be held up, and the remainder had stayed behind to guard the southern side of Suzhou, as well as the villages and towns along the way. Henry, I want to pick a character to give the sussing Shimei treatment every series I read. That's fair. We don't really have that right now. I guess Xiao Jiming is the closest thing we have to that at the current moment. Oh no. I don't want that fate for him. He was determined to be the fish that slipped through the net. The only company Lei Jingzhe had brought along was the dolt Li Xiong, not because he trusted him, but because this kid had been brought up by him from a sprout. He could be counted on to be obedient, and Lei Jingzhe could tell what he was thinking at a glance. Lei Jingzhe was on horseback, while Li Xiong ran behind him on foot. He ran with great, vigorous strides and had no trouble keeping up with Lei Jingzhe's horse. They had already been on the road all night, and Li Xiong was still naively looking forward to meeting up with Liu Er and the rest. Have some water. Lei Jingzhe tossed the water skin to Li Xiong as he reined his horse to a halt. We won't be stopping to rest today. Li Xiong uncorked the water skin and gulped down more than half. You stupid brat, Lei Jingzhe cursed at him. If you drink it all now, what are we going to drink tonight? With that much water in your stomach, you're going to be whining about wanting to piss later. I won't, Ge. Li Xiong wiped his mouth with a smile and patted his stomach. I'll just run it off. Lei Jingzhe hung the water skin back on the saddle. Are you hungry? Li Xiong shook his head. I stuffed myself last night. My stomach's still full. We'll have meat once we're back on Mount Luo. Thus assured, Lei Jingzhe didn't tarry any longer and raced ahead with Li Xiong in tow. They had allies in Dunzhou, and the relay station there could pass on his orders to mobilize the bandit troops still guarding Mount Luo. Lei Jingzhe didn't dare slow his pace. He was still uneasy. He had to arrive before news of the capture of Ding Niu, Liu Er, and the others made its way back to Mount Luo. If that news arrived first, a good half of the trust and reputation he'd built up in his time on Mount Luo would crumble in an instant, and it would be much harder to command the men. The checkpoints along the roads gradually grew more lax, no longer as strict as they had been within a few miles of Bianshui town. The number of Imperial Army soldiers thinned as well. Once Lei Jingzhe passed the outlying vegetable fields, he no longer saw any signs of them. At night, he and Li Xiong rested beside a small stream. Li Xiong speared a few fish and roasted them for Lei Jingzhe. Without seasoning or herbs, the flesh tasted fishy and bitter, but Li Xiong ate with relish and, after filling his stomach, collapsed onto his back and fell asleep. Lei Jingzhe didn't dare leave the campfire burning through the night. He covered it with dirt before lying down himself. He hadn't slept for a day and a night. Gradually, he found it harder and harder to keep his eyes open. He leaned against a tree and drifted off. He didn't know how much time had passed when he startled awake. He propped himself up, stilled his breathing, and listened for any signs of activity in the forest. The wind was strong tonight. Tree branches swayed, setting the leaves rustling in intermittent waves. Li Xiong was still sound asleep, his snores thunderous. Lei Jingzhe listened intently for a long time. He heard nothing amiss, yet he couldn't shake his unease. He kicked Li Xiong awake and silently gestured for the boy to get the horse. As Li Xiong untangled the reins from the tree where he'd tied their mount, He felt a powerful urge to relieve himself. They had never stopped for a break during the day, and he had fallen right asleep after dinner. Unable to hold it any longer, he whispered to Lei Jingzhe, "Guh, I gotta pee." Lei Jingzhe clicked his tongue and made a fist as if to thrash him, then motioned for him to hurry. Li Xiong stepped behind a tree and loosened his belt. The tinkling sound echoed in the silent wood. Having still seen no signs of movement, Lei Jingzhe began to relax. He led the horse forward a few steps. The horse whickered, and he suddenly realized what was off. Why wasn't there even a chirp from the bird or the insects? From the birds or insects? Li Xiong wasn't yet done relieving himself when he heard Li Jingzhe mount his horse and hiss, "Let's go!" The boy yelped in acknowledgement, then rushed to tie his belt and ran after the horse. Lei Jingzhe lashed the horse's flank with his riding crop and charged haphazardly through the shadows cast by the trees. The branches swayed in the wind, looming like demons, brandishing their claws and baring their fangs, closing in from all sides. Lei Jingzhe's back was drenched in cold sweat, freezing in the wind. He didn't look back at Li Xiong. His sole focus was on leaving this forest as quickly as possible. The horse under him was exhausted from running all throughout the day. No matter how he whipped it, it couldn't gallop as fast as it had when it was fresh. The sound of footsteps came drumming toward him from all sides. Lei Jingzhe was struck by the sense that he was being chased by some gargantuan beast, so massive it shook the ground. He crashed headlong through the tangle of trees and charged out of the forest, only to yank back on the reins, gasping for breath as he stared fixedly ahead. The hem of Xiao Qie's robe fluttered behind him in the wind. Perched on his shoulder was a gerfalcon, its head tilted quizzically to one side. The darkness of the night seemed to spread from behind Xiao Qie, weighing on Lei Jingzhe's limbs, swallowing them, and rendering him immobile as he sat stiffly atop the horse. A raspy whistle escaped Lei Jingzhe's throat. He snapped back to his senses and dragged his horse around, but the Imperial army was already behind him. Xiao Qie had deliberately hidden some of his men in the cover of the forest, preventing Lei Jingzhe from guessing how many he had with him, a direct counterpart to Lei Jingzhe's deception as he'd approached Suzhou. Now Lei Jingzhe, too, could enjoy being played for a fool. "Go ahead and run," Xiao Qie said, his voice deep. Lei Jingzhe released the reins and raised both hands, palms open. "You win. I concede defeat." Snowcrest shook its head and neighed. Xiao Qie said nothing. Lei Jingzhe slid off his horse, keeping both hands up to indicate his surrender. He was very clear about his current predicament. Once he had dismounted, he removed the broadsword from his waist, and met Xiao Qie's eyes as he bent to lay it on the ground. "We can still talk." Interest piqued, Xiao Qie said, "Go on." Lei Jingzhe steadied his breathing. Surrounded by the cold glint of steel, beads of sweat ran down his temples. "You are going back to Li Bei. You won't be in Suzhou long. Killing me now won't deter the bandits of Mount Luo forever. When they come back here, it will plunge Dunzhou and Duanzhou, which have only just begun to see some recovery, into chaos. Why not let me go? I can keep the situation in both prefectures stable, and Suzhou will have time to rebuild its garrison troops." The cawing of a crow rang out overhead. Meng braced himself. Spreading his wings, he took to the air, gliding on the wind, then swooped into the dark canopy of the trees. The forest seemed to hold its breath. Lei Jingzhe kept his gaze trained on Xiao Qie, as if to prove he was confident of success. It was not the end of the road for him yet. Xiao Qie lifted a hand and rested it by his waist. The two men faced each other in silence. In the instant, Meng's talons tore into the crow. Lei Jingzhe flipped up his broadsword with his toe, flung off its sheath, and dove forward in a roll. Springing up from the ground, he arced into the air and swung the sword straight down toward Xiao Qiye's face. Blade collided with blade, throwing sparks as they scraped against each other in a show of their wielder's power. The scorching heat that had persisted for several days had dissipated in the night wind, while the sky that had been clear and boundless under the sun was now cloaked in dark clouds. A few fat raindrops pattered down, followed seconds later by a sudden, violent downpour, as if the heavens themselves could no longer bear the heat and had sent rain to scour the filth from the world. Might that be, stains of filth? Remnants of it, even? Li Xiong had lost track of Lei Jingzhe in the dark. He circled the forest for a long time before he finally heard the faint clash of fighting through the rain. He followed the sound, brushing aside wet branches and leaves as he trampled through fresh mud. Why did I just lose my place? The moment he tumbled out of the trees, he came face to face with the Imperial army brandishing their blades. He was unarmed, yet when he saw Lei Jingzhe at a disadvantage, fighting under the curtain of rain, he bellowed in desperation. In the next moment, he had turned and wrapped his arms around a withered tree trunk as thick as his calf. With a single motion, he pulled it up out of the ground like a club. Daga! Charging like a raging bull, with unchecked strength, Li Xiong swung the tree, sending one side of the Imperial army scattering in disarray. Xiao Qiye hadn't expected Li Xiong to possess such power. Caught off guard, he ducked out of the trajectory of the tree trunk Li Xiong was brandishing. Lei Jingzhe, sporting a fresh blade wound, saw his opportunity and rushed back to Li Xiong's side. Li Xiong's extraordinary strength was innate, and even more frightening than Xiao Qiye's. Swinging the tree to ward off blades and swords, the boy shouted, "Guh, I'll carry you on my back." Lei Jingzhe jumped onto Li Xiong's back. Pointing the tree trunk before him like a sword, Li Xiong bellowed and charged through the soldiers that surrounded them. He did not fear the blades, nor did he fear Xiao Qiye. All newborn calves possessed such a temperament. He had eyes only for his big brother Lei Jingzhe. Li Xiong felt no blade, no pain, as the blades cut into his arms. With Lei Jingzhe on his back, he knocked over the wall of people before him and broke into a mad dash through the torrential rain. Blood dripped from Lei Jingzhe's wound with every step, dyeing Li Xiong's back red. Li Xiong wiped rain from his face and sobbed, "Guh, don't die." Lei Jingzhe was not a man who would resign himself to his fate. He had not had a pleasant time back in the Zhu clan in Duanzhou. His father had spurned his mother, so he discarded his surname and renamed himself Lei Jingzhe. He had run into danger many times on Mount Luo, yet he had always been able to wait it out until things took a turn for the better. But Xiao Qiye was like the sudden rain on this night. The precipice he had never seen in front of him. He couldn't, believe his time was up, yet, at the moment, he could only watch as the scales tipped against him. Damn it. Pressing a hand over his wound, Lei Jingzhe snapped, "Shut up." Hearing the pounding of hooves close behind him, Li Xiong sprinted with his teeth clenched and his eyes focused on the horizon. This kid was truly exceptional. Even ordinary horses couldn't catch up to him as he ran. But Xiao Qiye's Snowcrest was extraordinary. In the blink of an eye, the horse was hot on their tail. Li Xiong was giving his all, but he was still a growing boy. As he leapt across the stream, his leg cramped and he lost his balance, crashing to the ground on the other side. Hissing from the pain, he dragged Lei Jingzhe up from the bank, still intending to flee with his big brother on his back. Before he could, Lei Jingzhe called out, "Xiao Qiye!" Knowing there was no escape, he continued, "If you're willing to spare me, the bandits of Mount Law will be yours to command. I still have some influence with them. I can still be of use." Xiao Qiye flung away the drops of blood on Wolf's Fang. Snowcrest stamped its hooves twice before breaking into a gallop, streaking toward the bandit. Lei Jingzhe twisted Li Xiong's face around to meet his eyes and grabbed his hand. His voice changed in timbre amid his violent gasps. He desperately wanted to cheat death. The grip on Li Xiong's hand tightened as he said, "Little bear, kill him. Kill him." Young Li Xiong scraped rainwater off his face, one leg dragging behind him. He spread his arms wide and stabilized his stance as he got ready to throw himself at Snowcrest. His sturdy body trembled, yet he looked right at Xiao Qiye, then bellowed and charged straight ahead. He wrapped his arms around Snowcrest's neck. The horse screamed, and though he knew little of martial arts, he shifted his weight in a wrestling move clearly learned from the Biansha tribes and flung Snowcrest into the muddy water. Don't... They better not do anything to this horse, okay? If Tang Zhou does something to this horse, I'm going to... I'm gonna... okay. Xiao Qiye fisted his hands in Li Xiong's collar as Li Xiong struggled to stay upright with only one foot planted on the ground. He twisted his body, his young face scrunched in an effort as he pounded on Xiao Qiye's arms and shouted, "Guh, run!" With Li Xiong in his grip, Xiao Qiye watched Lei Jingzhe roll down the muddy slope, but he didn't give chase. As Li Xiong snarled and tried to bite him, Xiao Qiye grabbed the back of his neck, slamming him into the ground and burying his nose and mouth in the mud. Choking, Li Xiong struggled violently. "Tie him up." It was the last thing Li Xiong heard before the backside of a blade struck him, and he knew no more. When Tan Tai Hu arrived on horseback a short time later, the rain had tapered off. He found Xiao Qiye wiping mud off Snowcrest's flanks. "Okay, we're good. I think we're good." Wait, yeah, I think we're okay. Oh, Henry, I don't want to think about that right now. I think we're okay right now, at least. You know, at least for the moment. When he saw Tan Tai Hu, he removed the long sleeve he wore for cleaning horses and beckoned him over. "Master," Tan Tai Hu said, "I'll lead the men to cut him off from the southeast. He won't get far." Instead of agreeing, Xiao Qiye asked, "Have you rounded up all the bandits in the forest?" Assuming Xiao Qiye wanted a head count, Tan Tai Hu began to turn back to ask for the record book. But as Xiao Qiye cleaned his fingers of mud, he said, "It's fine as long as you've caught them. You don't have to show me. Go get ready. We're heading back to the city." Tan Tai Hu was taken aback. Xiao Qiye had already picked up the tack to resaddle Snowcrest. Tan Tai Hu walked the few steps with him. "Master, if we let him go now, won't we be letting the tiger return to the mountain, ready to leap on us again later?" Xiao Qiye wiped mud off the seat. "I'm not just letting him go. I'm planning to send him off with great fanfare. Get a few squads to follow him. He has a stab wound. Don't let him die on the road. Shadow him all the way to Dunzhou. Don't worry about anything else." Tan Tai Hu only had to think for a moment to grasp Xiao Qiye's intent. He grinned. "I'm off then, master. I'll bring a few dozen men with me and escort him back to Dunzhou within 3 days. Xiao Qiye looked with cool detachment in the direction Lei Jingzhe had fled. A sopping wet mung landed on his shoulder and preened his blood-stained feathers. Xiao Chia grabbed the sleeve he'd used to wipe down Snowcrest to clean Meng's talons. Hold them up, he cooed patiently. I'll wipe them for you. If you track mud all over Lanzhou's shoulders when we get back, I'm the one stuck washing his robe. That's the end of the chapter. That's a relief. That's a very big relief. So, oh, don't mind me almost spilling my tea. So, that was a lot. But thankfully, the horse is okay. We're okay. I guess they have, what's his name? Li Xiong. They have Li Xiong as like a prisoner, kind of. Why? This is probably not Li Xiong. It only just occurred to me that Li Xiong's surname is Li. But, like, that can't be the same one, right? As the you know, the imperial family. Like, that's a different Li. That's gotta be a different Li. Right? It just didn't occur to me this whole time. I was just like, yeah, because the first thing that I thought about was, oh, his name is Xiong, like a bear, and he's like a bear, and that's kind of funny, and I just, like, didn't think about anything else regarding that. And it wasn't... Now I have all kinds of thoughts, and we have to wait until Wednesday to find out anything more. When we return, we will be on chapter 116, which is called Chen Yang. So something is gonna happen to Chen Yang is doing something. Oh, you can't make it on Wednesday, Henry. I'm so sorry. Yeah, you'll catch up. I don't know, but now I've got a lot to think about. So, yeah, wait. Yeah, see, Chen Yang, I don't know. Right? Yeah, chapter title being Chen Yang is like, is he up to something? Is he doing something bad? Is something gonna happen to him? Like, what? Or is it just gonna be like inconsequential, I don't know, character building? Like, we don't know. So that's fun. Much to consider, homosexually. Yep. So, I will see y'all on Wednesday. And, this was fun. This was exciting. This last chapter was like, she was doing that thing where it got really cinematic, and I was just like, I can visualize this, and it was great. I love when that happens in this book. So, yeah. Have a good one, and I will see y'all soon. Bye.